first question, a Linux administrator is alerted to a storage capacity issue on a server without a specific mount point or directory. Which of the following commands would be most useful for troubleshooting? We need to select two options here. Our second question, after listing the properties of a system account, a systems administrator wants to remove the expiration date of a user account. Which of the following commands will accomplish this task? Our third question, a Linux engineer receives a report that files created within a certain group are being modified by users who are not group members. The engineer wants to reconfigure the server so that only file owners and group members can modify new files by default. Which of the following commands would accomplish this task? Our fourth question, a Linux administrator needs to resolve a service that has failed to start. The administrator runs the following command: ls -l and specifies the file name. And we have the output here. Which of the following is most likely the issue? Our fifth question, a systems administrator pressed Ctrl Z after starting a program using the command line, and the shell prompt was presented. In order to go back to the program, which of the following commands can the administrator use? Our sixth question, a systems administrator made some unapproved changes prior to leaving the company. The newly hired administrator has been tasked with reverting the system to a compliant state. Which of the following commands will list and remove the corresponding package? Hello and welcome to this 591 lab, CompTIA Linux XK0-005 review Q&A with Demo Lab. My name is Philip and I want to thank you for choosing 591 Lab. Our mission at 591 Lab is to provide our clients with exceptional exam preparation experience for certifications in Cisco, CompTIA, Huawei, Aruba, Juniper, Palo Alto, and Fortinet exam tracks. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at 7 sample questions and answers, and then we're going to do a demo lab. Our first question, a Linux administrator is alerted to a storage capacity issue on a server without a specific mount point or directory. Which of the following commands would be most useful for troubleshooting? We need to select two options here, and the correct answer is B and C. We would need to use the df command or the mount command whenever we're troubleshooting mount points or directories within a Linux server. Our second question, after listing the properties of a system account, a systems administrator wants to remove the expiration date of a user account. Which of the following commands will accomplish this task? We have 4 options available to us, and the correct answer is D. We would use the ch command with a hyphen, capital E, and then specify -1. And lastly, we need to specify the account name here, and this is going to remove the expiration date for this particular account. Our third question, a Linux engineer receives a report that files created within a certain group are being modified by users who are not group members. The engineer wants to reconfigure the server so that only file owners and group members can modify new files by default. Which of the following commands would accomplish this task? We have 4 options available to us, and the correct answer is B. We would use the umask command and specify the values 002. And this is going to ensure only file owners and group members can modify new files by default. Our fourth question, a Linux administrator needs to resolve a service that has failed to start. The administrator runs the following command: ls -l and specifies the file name. And we have the output here. Which of the following is most likely the issue? We have 4 options available to us, and the correct answer is A. The service does not have permissions to read or write the startup file. As we can see, a number of hash symbols here indicating no permission has been set on this file. Our fifth question, a systems administrator pressed Ctrl-Z after starting a program using the command line, and the shell prompt was presented. In order to go back to the program, which of the following commands can the administrator use? We have 4 options available to us, and the correct answer is A. We would use the FG command, which stands for foreground, and it's going to bring the program to the foreground. Our sixth question, a systems administrator made some unapproved changes prior to leaving the company. The newly hired administrator has been tasked with reverting the system to a compliant state. Which of the following commands will list and remove the corresponding package? We have 4 options available to us. And the correct answer is D. You would use the DNF history command in combination with the DNF history undo last. And this is going to revert the system to a compliant state. Finally, our last question in this episode, which of the following enables administrators to configure and enforce MFA on a Linux system? We have 4 options available to us, and the correct answer is C. We would use the pluggable authentication modules when we would like to configure and enable MFA, also known as multi-factor authentication, on a Linux system. I'm going to bring up our lab now so we can take a look at these topics within our Linux system. Here within our CentOS system, we first want to take a look at the df command. This is useful when you're troubleshooting mount point. If we simply issue the df command, we can see various mount points here listed, and we can see values here in various columns. Now, if we would like to format this output in a human readable format, we can simply use the hyphen with a small h option. And as we can see, it presents the output in a human-friendly format where we can see the size depicted, and we have things like megabyte, gigabyte, and so on. Additionally, we can see the partitions, and we can see where they're mounted here on the right hand side where it says mounted on. The next command we want to take a look at whenever we're troubleshooting mount issues is the mount command. If we simply enter the mount command here, the output is going to spit across the screen. Now we can also format this output to make it more human readable. We can rerun the mount command and pipe it to the column command. And now we specify the option -T. And this time you'll notice the output is more user-friendly. Let me reduce the size of the terminal window. There we go. So on the left column, we can see the various partitions. In this column, we can see the actual mount point, and we can see the permissions for the various mount point when they were mounted. You can also see the file system type here where it says type in this column. So whenever we're troubleshooting mount point issues, we can either leverage the df command or we can leverage the mount command. Now we're going to focus on account expiration similar to question 2, which we saw in our slides. To view the account expiration settings for a user account, we can issue the // command. small l, and now we need to specify the user account. For this user account, we can see the last password change. It says password expires is set to never. Account expires is also set to never. Now let's set the account expiration date for the user account Philip. We'll use the sudo command, and now we'll issue the ch command. The reason I'm using the sudo command in front of the ch command is because when we're making changes to the ch command, we need to either issue the command as root or issue the command with administrative privileges. Now we'll use the -E, and now we need to specify the expiration date. And lastly, we need to specify the user account. Now let's rerun the ch command with a -l option for the user account Philip. This time it says account expires, and we can see the date which we just set. Now if we would like to remove the account expiration date for the user account, similar to question 2, we'll leverage the ch command once again, and we'll prepend it with the word sudo, so we can run the ch command with administrative privilege. We'll use the -E, -1, and lastly we need to specify the user account. And as we can see, where it says account expires, it's now set to never, similar to question 2. Now let's focus on permissions. Whenever we're creating a file and we want to ensure only the file owner and the group members can modify new files by default, similar to question 3, we can leverage the umask command. If we issue the umask command without any options, we can see the current umask setting. We can change the umask here on the terminal, but this change is only going to be temporary within this session. So if I issue the command umask and I specify 002, this value is going to ensure only file owners and group members can modify new files by default. We can see the value changed. If we would like to set the umask value for the entire system, well then we could edit the /etc/bashrc file. Take a look at the content of the /etc/bashrc file. Now let's rerun the cat command and pipe it to grep for the umask. We're only going to see contents relating to umask here. If we want to make the change for all users across the system permanently, we can edit this file /etc/bashrc, and it's going to be for the entire system. There is also a .bashrc file within the home directory for the user, and it's prepended with a dot, meaning the file is hidden by default. So if we wanted to affect only a single user, we can add our entry within this file, or if we want the changes to affect the entire server, then we would edit the /etc/bashrc file. So this is how we can set the umask value. Now let's take a look at permissions, similar to question 4, which we saw on the slides. Here we can see a file called startup file, and the permissions is all set to blank. This means no permission has been set for this file, as we saw on question 4. So any service trying to call this file is going to encounter an error as no permission has been set here. If we would like to configure some permissions on this file, we can use the chmod command. So for illustration, let's say we wanted to grant the owner of this file. We will use the small u, which stands for user. And now we're going to use the plus symbol. Now if we want to grant the owner of this file, which is the user root, permission to read this file, we can use the letter R. And let's say we want the user root to be able to write this file, we can use the letter W. And if we would like the user root to be able to execute this file, we're going to use the letter X. And now we need to specify the file name. Similar to the previous commands, we need to execute this as either the root user, or we're going to prepend the command with the sudo in front of the command. And now we can see for the user root, which is the owner of this file, has the read, write, and execute permissions. However, the group and the other, they would not be able to access this file. If we wanted to grant the group called root to be able to access this file, we will have to use the chmod command once again. And instead of the small u, we're going to use the small g, which stands for group. And let's say that we only want the group called root to be able to read and execute this file, but not write any changes. You can take out the W and leave the R and the X. So any member of the group called root would be able to read and execute, but they would not be able to write any changes to this file. And now we see the small r, which stands for read, and the small x, which stands for execute. Notice at the middle, there's a hyphen indicating this permission bit has not been set, which means to write. So this chmod command would correlate with question 4, where we saw some permission errors. We can leverage this chmod command to solve those errors. Now let's take a look at background and foreground. Similar to question 5, which we saw on our slide, I'm going to start the gedit text editor from within the terminal environment, and this is going to open the text editor. Now back in the terminal here, if I try to execute any command, for instance, let's say we try to execute a top command, you'll notice that the command does not run. This is because the gedit text editor is in the foreground. What this means for us is that I can add content and remove content from within this text editor. And I can save my changes and so on. Now if I press the Ctrl Z back in the terminal here, if I bring up back the text editor, you'll notice I'm unable to make any changes to this file. As we can see, it says text editor is not responding. I'll select wait. Back in the terminal, I can issue the jobs command, and this is going to list the existing jobs which I started here, and it says for gedit it's currently stopped. Now if I wanted to resume this program, I can issue the FG command. It stands for foreground, and I can press enter, and it's going to enable me to make changes in the gedit text editor. Or I can specify the FG command space and specify the job ID number. In this case, we only have one job. Now back here in the gedit text editor, I'm allowed to make changes, as we can see. Or if I go back into the terminal and I press Ctrl Z once again, You can see it says it's currently stopped. Now if I wanted to resume the gedit text editor from within the terminal and at the same time be able to work from within the terminal, I can issue the bg command. It stands for background. And now I can specify the job ID. In our case, we only have one job, and this is going to append the ampersand symbol at the end of the command. Now I'm able to make changes. And at the same time, if I go back into the terminal, I can also issue other commands. Now if I issue the jobs command, you can see it says it's currently running, as opposed to earlier where we saw it said stopped. So this is how we can work with the foreground and the background when we have various jobs that we want to start. If we want to start it in the background, other than using the bg command. Let me close the gedit text editor. And now when we run the jobs command once again, it says it's done. And now it removed it from the queue. Now let's say we wanted to start the gedit text editor and place it directly into the background rather than have it take up the foreground and prevent us from working at the terminal. We would simply issue the gedit command. And now I'm going to append the ampersand symbol. When I come back into the terminal, you can see it says it's currently running. This is similar to question 5. We saw we would use the fg command, and we also illustrated here we can leverage the bg command to send a job into the background. And if we wanted to start a job in the background to begin with, we would simply append the ampersand symbol at the end of the command. Now let's take a look at the DNF history command, similar to question 6, which we saw in our slides. As we can see, the last changes to our system, we have the date and the time and the various actions. See the install action on this date, and there is also the upgrade action. Now for illustration purposes, similar to question 6, let's say we wanted to bring the system back into a compliant state. We would issue the DNF command, specify the keyword history. Now when I press the tab key, we can see various options we can issue with the DNF history command. In our case, to bring the system back into a compliant state, similar to question 6, we're going to use the keyword undo. Now we need to specify the keyword last, and this keyword we need to manually specify. Similar to the previous questions, we need to run this command with either administrative privileges or as a root user. So we'll run it with the sudo prepended in front of this command. And we're now presented with a notification telling us it's going to downgrade these packages. And we can see the total download size. To proceed, in our case, the system is already in a compliant state, so we're going to press the letter N. But if the system was not in a compliant state, similar to question 6, then we would press the Y. So the two commands that we used was the DNF history command, and we used the DNF history undo last command. Now we're going to focus on multi-factor authentication, which we saw on question 7 on our slides. We're going to install and configure MFA using PAM, which stands for Pluggable Authentication Module. We're going to install the Google Authenticator, or brought up our Ubuntu server here. The package we're going to install is called libpam-google-authenticator. Now we're going to start the Google Authenticator. We're being asked if we want authentication tokens to be time-based. I'm going to press Y on the keyboard. Now I'm going to scan this code on my mobile phone. Now I need to put in the token that was generated on my Authenticator app on my phone. We'll press Y to update the file. We will also press Y here. This is going to prevent man-in-the-middle attack. Likewise, I'm going to press Y here for a token to be generated every 30 seconds. And also, to enable rate limiting, I'll press Y once again. Now we need to enable PAM on SSH. So I'll edit the /etc/pam.d/sshd file. I'll run the command as sudo. Now let's go to the bottom of this file. I'm going to add a new entry. Now let's save our changes. Now we're going to edit the /etc/ssh/sshd_config file. And we're going to scroll along to the section that says PAM. Now we're going to add an entry here that says challenge response authentication. And we're going to say yes. Now let's save our changes. Lastly, we're going to restart the sshd.service daemon. And this is how we would configure MFA using PAM within our Linux server, similar to question 7, which we saw on our slides. Alright, let's go back to our slides. I want to thank you all for attending today's class at 591 Lab. We hope you found the material informative and helpful. Please don't hesitate to contact us. We appreciate your participation and look forward to seeing you in our future classes. Have a great day. My name is Philip, and I want to thank you for choosing 591 Lab.